Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, September 22nd. I'm Mark Sponsler and I'm your host for tonight's presentation. We'll be talking about waves, the jet stream, surface level pressure, the MJO, long-term stuff like El Nino, La Nina, and what is the outlook for this winter. Alright, let's get into the presentation. Taking a quick look at the South Pacific Ocean, we don't see a whole lot going on. A little bit of what was a gale, still producing 26-foot seas in the central South Pacific Ocean. But other than that, pretty calm pattern is setting up. Our focus now will become the North Pacific, but even that, not a whole lot's going on. But we're going to focus there anyway, get us set up, because we are in the season for that area of the planet. All right. So here we are, jet stream level winds. These winds are up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south, right? We're in the northern hemi, so in the north, it dips to the south. That sets up a counterclockwise flow aloft, sort of like an eddy, if you will, and that is the hallmark of low pressure in the northern hemisphere, and that also manifests itself down at the surface, and that, of course, low pressure generates wind, winds generate seas, seas as they radiate away from the fetch area turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, produces surf. So we're looking for a trough. We see sort of a trough mainly right here in we'll call that the northwestern Gulf of Alaska. Not particularly strong, but there are winds. It was at 140 knot winds feeding it a little bit. So that's good. That's as of 18Z Sunday. We'll put this into motion. And it's this portion of the trough we're more interested in, though back here, this actually looks better by the date line, being fed by, what was that, 170, 180 knot winds. Put that into motion. But see, this trough, so it looks pretty good on Monday, but by Monday night into Tuesday, it totally pinches off, and really nothing happens. What you see is you get a ridge here, and that would support a clockwise flow aloft, and that's the hallmark of high pressure. So one there, and another one off the U.S. West Coast. That sort of suggests building high pressure, wind, not so good. All right, so we're into Tuesday. No upper level support for gale production of any kind. The trough just completely pinched off as you get into Wednesday night, Thursday. High pressure takes over. Cutoff low, actually, though. This cutoff trough north of Hawaii maybe will provide a little something. You know, here we are. We're late September. You would expect to see, if this was like an El Nino, pretty strong El Nino year, you would expect to see the jet down around 40 north and, you know, good troughs in play. We're not seeing that. Instead, we're seeing the jet just placed pretty far to the north, not particularly strong. I mean, this kind of looks more like a La Nina pattern, especially here you go. Look at this. The ridge again setting up Friday, Saturday, high pressure, filling the Gulf of Alaska. That's not good. And over here in the West Pacific, the jet is supposed to be split. Just that doesn't do anything to help support gale formation either. I mean, this is a pretty healthy looking ridge here as we get into Sunday, and let's just see where we go from there. There we are, 180 hours out. Ridge in control. Now a nice little backdoor trough here maybe for California. Maybe there'll be some precip or something out of that. Kind of early in the year though. Mainly for the Sierra is what this would look like. Weather maker there. But over the greater Pacific Ocean, not a whole lot going on. Let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds. There was sort of a reason we were, focusing on the North Pacific. One, there is actually something there where there's literally nothing expected for the southern hemi. So here we go. 18Z Sunday, gale developing in the northwestern Gulf, fed by decent winds and a little bit of a trough there, 30 knot winds, and building by about this time right now to 35 knot winds. 45 about 11 o'clock tonight and early tomorrow morning, 45 knot west winds, looking pretty good, pretty far to the north, and then pushing up into Alaska on Tuesday and fading out. Another sort of extratropical or tropical, somewhat low, supposed to develop over Kamchatka, 30 knot fetch, forecast to push off that area Tuesday night. Maybe building a little into Wednesday. Was at 35 knot winds. That's good for 20, 23-foot seas, something like that, I guess. We'll see. We'll go look at the wave model. This actually looks a little better than it did yesterday when we did the forecast update. the written forecast, and it moves over to the dateline, just kind of fades out, goes into the Bering Sea. High pressure in the Gulf of Alaska by Friday, but not as strong as one would expect by looking at the jet stream charts. That's kind of good news, but as you see, high pressure there. Weak cutoff low on Sunday, a week out, and that is pretty much it. Not a whole lot happening. Doing a quick look at the wave models here. So we're at Sunday. Here comes our developing gale. No, there we go. Sunday night, what is that, about 25 foot seas. Building to 30 feet Monday morning. 31.5 feet right there to be exact. All right, that's pretty good. And continuing into midday Monday, fading out 28 foot seas or so, 29 foot seas and gone. So what this looks like is, yes, some swell production, mainly for the U.S. West Coast, Pacific Northwest primarily, down into Central California. Pretty north-angled swell, but maybe 15, 16-second period. Let's see what happens after that. But notice there's seas building off of Northern California, associated with, we presume, wind and high pressure there. And we'll get that when we get into the wind swell portion of the forecast. We'll take a look at it. But you get it. That's pretty good, strong wind. So the swell from the Gulf relative to California will probably be buried or at least well intermixed with local wind swell from Point Conception northward. Pacific Northwest might fare a little bit better. Otherwise, we're looking, oh, that's right, that little gale off Kamchatka. Yeah, what's it supposed to produce? 23 foot seas. Yeah, maybe a little something for Hawaii, but even that's a long way. And most of the energy's pushing due east, not southeast towards the island. So kind of a slow, not a whole lot going on. Fetch, it looks like, coming off the U.S. West Coast. What's that, 10 or 11 foot seas? Let's go back. Yeah, 10 or 11, maybe 12 foot seas. Probably not even big enough to make decent wind swell for Hawaii. And then we go back into a pretty quiet pattern. So the North Pacific, going to give it one little try tonight into Monday, maybe some swell, and after that, not a whole lot. There is one tropical system, Tropical Storm Kiko. What's that? 35 knot winds right now, and it's, oh, let's get you Hawaii. There's Hawaii there, so 6, 12, about 1,200 nautical miles away from Hawaii, and with 35 knot winds, supposed to build to 40 knots when it gets here, but that's still not anywhere near enough. Seas are 10 feet. No swell from that. It's just supposed to fade out. And after that, the tropics are expected to go quiet. Had a little bit of a run there. No real swell resulted, but at least there was some activity. But the sense is the MJO is going to be kind of not helpful in terms of tropics. So when you get the active phase of the MJO, moving over the eastern Pacific or the central Pacific, it tends to favor tropical storm development. You get westerly anomalies down on the equator, and that sort of sets things up, and you can spin up some storms. But we believe the active phase of the MJO has moved on, and with that, so will tropical activity. And it's not late in the year. It's actually, not a bad time of year, but all the activity seems to be focused over in the Atlantic in regards to the tropics. So let's go take a look down south, okay? Because there is actually, if you look at the buoys, you got to look at the high-res buoys. Don't look at the wind swell. But there is a little swell. What is it? 1.5 feet to maybe 2 feet at 18 seconds hitting California right now. Nothing huge and super inconsistent because there was a gale down here. The remnants of the gale are all but, let's see, we're on a hindcast. Right, so there was a gale here. It's gone. It produced a swell. A second gale developed on Monday. So that's last Monday. Sort of a leading system, a tiny system with 40-foot seas. That doesn't really count, but it's this one that pushed under Tasmania on Tuesday with 40-foot seas. And back in here, you're pushing swell up the Great Circle paths towards California. Not so much Hawaii, unless it's coming up through the Tasman Sea. But we had, 39, 40-foot seas there, and then those seas pushed east under New Zealand on, midday Wednesday, 35-foot seas, and it kind of continued east, and then it lifted north. Now, here's what's interesting for Hawaii. Watch this. The system kind of regrouped. Not huge seas, but 27-foot seas lifting due north. This is also good news for Tahiti as well. And it kind of regrouped, tiny area, 30-foot seas lifting due north, and then it faded out. And now we're into Sunday. Also notice there was a little low down here below with 30-foot seas aimed due east. We don't think anything's going to come from that. So the point being, this system that tracked under New Zealand, then rebuilt and lifted north, is pushing swell towards Hawaii. A pretty nice little pulse of swell is expected for Hawaii, and also swell into California. The short of it is there should be southern hemi swell for California pretty much all week into next weekend. Nothing huge, nothing dramatic, but something to ride. And that's better than, probably what we're going to get from the North Pacific. All right, so let's take this out. We're at, there's the current image. Let's go see what the forecast is for the southern hemi. Right, so here's the projection. We're just going to roll through this pretty quick. A little bit of a gale here in the far southeast Pacific. Expect on Monday, 30-foot seas. But again, all aimed off to the east. Yeah, Southern California could get a pulse of energy from this, sideband energy, but probably nothing too strong. Mainly Chile, Peru at best. And then after that, things get pretty quiet. You almost see everything starting to push down to the southeast. That's not a good sign. That's just high pressure. And here we are. We're out a week out on Sunday, and still nothing significant. I mean, you want to see at least a good broad area 30-foot seas. We're not seeing it. Given the time of year, it's no surprise the southern hemi is going to sleep. We just wish the northern hemi would be a little bit more forceful in its in its turn towards autumn, but so far no luck. All right, so as promised, wind swell forecast. All right, so currently high pressure 1028 millibar high, situated in the southern Gulf. Wind flows clockwise around that. Here's our developing gale up here in the northwestern Gulf, producing 15 or so knot winds, pushing towards Hawaii, but not fully impacting the islands. Probably good for some little wind swell along east-facing shores there. Yeah, there's north wind raking the north and central California coast, but it's weak, 15 knot winds. I mean, what was it? Waist high or so in Northern California today at exposed north-facing breaks. No big deal. Here's Kiko hanging down here. We'll just pull the remnants of Kiko. It's not so much Kiko that's the issue, but you have the high pressure here, low pressure here. The isobars tighten between the two of them. That produces fetch, and that produces wind swell. So wind swell expected for Hawaii into Monday. Gradient starts building off of Northern California, 25, almost 30 knot winds. That's good for wind swell production down the central and North California coast. Remember, our gale up here too is producing swell. Let's see how this all plays out. Kiko fading, high pressure holding, still producing wind swell for Hawaii on Tuesday, but off of Northern California, 30, 35 knot winds off of Cape Mendocino, with probably an eddy flow, south winds along Central California. That makes for probably cleaner conditions here and wind swell. Wish we had real swell. Look at that, Wednesday, 35 knot winds. I mean, this is like it's the dead of summer and we're in fall. This is not a particularly good harbinger for the fall. When you have strong high pressure like this, that just smells of La Nina. Otherwise, if it was El Nino, you'd have troughs, you'd have low pressure, if not gales plowing through here. None of this would be happening. Instead, we're looking at like summertime wind swell in the end of September. Not good. 35, almost 40 knot winds off of Cape Mendocino late Wednesday. Eddy flow, south winds over Central California. Wind swell for sure. And maybe, remember we saw what looked like seas pushing towards Hawaii. I'll say the jury's out on whether wind swell is going to reach the Hawaiian Islands or not. But certainly, U.S. West Coast, whatever swell we were supposed to get from the Gulf will be buried in that wind swell. So we're into Friday. Same thing. I mean, just the gradient keeps holding. It almost looks, look at this. Massive high pressure starting to build in the Gulf of Alaska, 1030 millibars. That's not good in terms of support for storms or gales. And here comes the gradient again on Sunday, the 29th of September, if you believe the models, and continuing to produce wind swell. Low pressure tries to organize in the Gulf and just gets shunted north and not looking so good. All right, so let's play the game for precipitation as well. All right, so here we are, Sunday night. There's actually supposedly precipitation occurring in Oregon and Washington. And if you watch the models, I was looking at them this morning. They actually showed a weather system with snow pushing into Tahoe on like Monday, Tuesday. And now, one run of the model later, it's all completely gone. High pressure dominating the picture. A little bit of snow up there in British Columbia. Higher elevations is the assumption there. But we're just looking for anything. Maybe a little front. Watch for this. We'll put this back in motion. Looks like sort of a backdoor front on Saturday pushing down California, if you believe that. And then we're 180 hours out. Rain for Tahoe. Light rain at best, if you believe the models. So no real signs of fall in the ocean, over the ocean, in the mountains. Nothing, you know. I mean, yeah, we're getting some weak little systems, but that's about it. All right, let's try and figure out what's going on. The long-term outlook. What's going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation? That and El Nino or La Nina pretty much dictate everything. The MJO is like a mini version of El Nino or La Nina. That is, the active phase of the MJO is sort of like a weak, short-lived El Nino, and vice versa for the inactive phase of the MJO and La Nina. And the point being, when you have a pattern of stronger inactive phases of the MJO, that is a harbinger in the winter for La Nina. So let's see if we can see any evidence of that occurring, because there certainly is no apparent evidence for El Nino or strong versions of the active phase of the MJO. All right, first up, winds in the what we call the Kelvin wave generation area. Basically, winds over the equator. This is data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino, but you can also tease out information about the MJO from it. Here's the West Pacific. That is the equator. There's the East Pacific there. The arrows, that's all we're looking at. Disregard the colors. That's water temperature. Arrows are wind speed and direction. The bigger, longer the arrow, the harder the winds are blowing. So for sure, trades, east trades, all the way out to a point south of Hawaii. And then you get west of there in the Kelvin wave generation area, the area from the far West Pacific over to 170 west, just a little bit east of the dateline, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, right in there. If you get west anomalies and they hold long enough and they're strong enough, that's a sign of the active phase of the MJO. And if they blow hard enough for a long enough period of time, you can get a Kelvin wave. That is a ball of warm water that traverses under the equator the whole way across the Pacific. It takes like 3 months to make the journey. Then it can erupt off of Ecuador and erupt to the surface, creating a warm water slick there. And if you get successive strong active phases of the MJO and successive Kelvin waves, that's a harbinger for El Nino. All right, but the point being, we've had quite a few Kelvin waves over the past couple of years, and the warm water pool over here is pretty much tapped out, we think. So today, yeah, weak west winds, anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, we have kind of a neutral wind pattern here in the East Pacific. For sure, westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, suggesting the active phase of the MJO. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's see what the forecast is for the next week. All right, we've seen this chart before. This is 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. That is winds, the east-west component of the wind, and this is the whole planet on one chart. See the date line right there? So the Pacific Ocean starts about, we'll say 130 east. It goes the whole way over to about 90 west over here. Kelvin wave generation area between basically these two tick marks here. So if you go straight up, and this is past history here, you see reds, that's westerly anomalies. So it looked like we had an active phase of the MJO through about mid-September, and it kind of lingered and hung on till even today to this point. But you can see Also at the same time, over here in the Indian Ocean, a broad area of equally strong easterly anomalies are setting up, and the forecast has them moving into the Kelvin wave generation area a week out, while westerly anomalies start fading off, moving off to the east. So this suggests that the active phase of the MJO, which has been in control, is slowly to move out of the Pacific Ocean, probably into the Atlantic, and more than likely the inactive phase setting up. Let's go take a look 2 weeks out. First up, outgoing long wave radiation charts. Fancy words for sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. If you don't have any clouds, you get a bunch of sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface. That is typically the sign of high pressure, and high pressure is typically the sign of the inactive phase of the MJO. All right, so the oranges mean a lot of sunlight reflectivity. This looks like a building inactive phase of the MJO per the statistic model. The CA is a statistic model for the next 2 weeks. The dynamic model saying exactly the same thing. The two models are in sync. And you never see it look this much in sync. So my guess is for sure the inactive phase of the MJO is coming. So what's that mean? Well, it means probably not a lot of support for surf or storm production or swell production. And typically the inactive or the active phase lasts 3-4 weeks, something like that. So probably starting pretty soon is a good time to go take care of business. Do whatever you got to do, and wait for the active phase to come behind it, because when that happens, then you get a 3 or 4 week run of good surf, or at least better potential for storm development or rain or whatever. Basically weather in the Pacific Ocean. So these two models in sync, suggesting the inactive phase for the next 2 weeks. Phase diagrams, another way of looking at the MJO. It tells you where the active phase is, how strong it is, and what it's going to do for the next 2 weeks. So this is a different versions of statistic models. Where the heavy dot is where the active phase, where the active phase is, sorry. How do you read this chart? Assume you're looking down on the North Pole. This circle is the North Pole, all right? The MJO, whether active or inactive, moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean, over the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific, underneath the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. It just goes round and round and round, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker. Right now, where the heavy dot is where the active phase is, so it's in, I'd say the eastern Atlantic, getting ready to move, if not moving into North Africa already. The further the dot is away from the circle, the stronger it is. So this is a pretty modest active phase. So what this also means is on the exact opposite side of the planet, let's say Maritime Continent, Bali, somewhere like that, the inactive phase is probably in control. All right, the dynamic models, basically the same thing. Same position, same starting point. The forecast, all these squiggly green lines out here are different members of the model, of the GFS ensemble model. They're saying basically active phase for the next 2 weeks, locked here over North Africa, and vacillating in strength, but regardless if it's over North Africa, that does nothing for us, and that probably says that the inactive phase is going to be over in the Western Pacific. So no help from these models. The 40-day upper level model, another way of looking at the, you can look at the sunlight component of the MJO. You can look at a precipitation component. You can look at wind components. We look at all these. You pick what you can get, try to figure it out. So this is the upper level support for precipitation, okay? And oranges mean less precipitation, drier conditions, believe it or not. Greens mean more precipitation. So what this suggests is the inactive phase. Oh, and there is South America. There's Central America. New Guinea there. Here is the equator. Dateline is right down around here. So you see inactive phase of the MJO. You can see it literally moving. The forecast has it moving across and into Central America on about October 17th. And then you see the active phase starting to push into the West Pacific on early part of October. So to me, and this runs about a week ahead of what's down at the surface, so this suggests to me that we're going to have not a whole lot of storm production until the active phase returns to the Pacific, probably about, let's say, the third week, about the third week in October. And then we have a weak active phase making its way, here we get you down there, the whole way across the Pacific, all of October into the early part of November, and then another inactive phase behind that. So if there's a sweet spot for swell production for the start of fall, I'd say it's starting about mid-October. So we have 3 weeks, something like that, before any significant activity. That's not to say it won't happen. You can have storms during the inactive phase, but the odds are not in favor of it. And here's the CFS model and its forecast, okay? Whole planet on one chart again, Kelvin wave generation area, West Pacific, between these two tick marks right here, okay? Here's where we are today, so we just draw a line right up here. Here is that black line, notice this, the black line is the active phase of the MJO. Here's where we are today, so the active phase is moving out of the Kelvin wave generation area over the East Pacific. Notice around the active phase, tropical activity. Not always confined there, not always associated with the MJO, like over here in the Atlantic, but sometimes it is. All right, the forecast, that's a week, that's 2 weeks out. Look at this, is the inactive phase of the MJO making its run through the Pacific or the Kelvin wave generation area into, later part of October. Now here's the interesting part. Really strong easterly anomalies forecast over the Indian Ocean, and they are supposed to nudge off to the east, and then according to this model, they pull back. They don't traverse the Pacific, which is kind of interesting. It's sort of like nudges, then goes back to the Indian Ocean, stays strong. So a little bit interesting there. This model has been suggesting some weird stuff. In fact, we're just going to go look at it here in just a second. Here we go. And just a second is right now. All right, so, and this is the 3-month CFS model. So let's, so this one's a little different. Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks going up, but past history is down here. The forecast is up here, all right? And just eyeballing this, here's those easterly anomalies we were looking at in the last chart, right? And they bulge east, and then they return to the Indian Ocean. And they're pretty strong, too. Let's overlay the MJO. So here you go. Here's our active phase of the MJO moving east as we move up in time. Now here's this is a pretty strong, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contour line inactive phase of the MJO, plowing through the Pacific from, we'll say, starting about now, really, through October 25th or so, okay? And easterly anomalies make it about halfway into the Kelvin wave generation area, and you can see they kind of maybe go do this thing, but they all sort of pull back up in the Indian Ocean according to this model. Then we have the active phase, but it's only like 1, 2, maybe 3 contours. And that does its thing from late October the whole way into the early part of December. So that is a big target there for saying that's when you would have storm and swell production. And westerly anomalies supposedly pretty strong from, say first week in November the whole way into the early part, mid-December almost. That would be the time for surfing and storm production for sure, followed by a weak inactive phase after that. Let's put the low-pass filter on. So this filter is indicative of, we use it for looking for El Nino. When you see the black solid contour line, it's a low pressure bias. It was 3 contours, something like that, last winter. It's been very weak, just 1 contour, but that's way better than having, see that dotted black line? You don't want that over here. That's a sure sign of La Nina in the Pacific. And this is right over the date line, right? So theoretically, we're supposed to build to a 2nd contour in the beginning of October, and then a 3rd contour as we get into mid-December. This is almost like a weak El Nino. Don't know if I believe that. This model's been saying it, and actually the other day there was a little nudge of a 4th contour up here too. It was only on for like 1 run of the model. The model's been consistently forecasting this, but it just is not believable given all the other data we're seeing in the ocean, unless some miracle is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So anyway, the La Nina sign, the high pressure sign, supposedly is supposed to be tight over the Indian Ocean pretty much all winter, and the El Nino signal is supposed to be tight over the Pacific Ocean all winter per this model. So a little bit interesting here. All right, so what's going on in the ocean? So here's the little interesting part, and it's even getting more interesting, we'll just get into it. Okay, so West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is data from the TAO buoy array. These X's, these lines here, are the anchor lines on the TAO, on each individual buoy. The X is a sensor on the anchor line going down 300 meters down to the ocean surface. With this and a fancy model, you can sort of connect all the dots and get a profile of what subsurface temperatures in the ocean are like, both in the West and the East Pacific. Kind of impressive technology. All right, so the short of it is 30 degrees. This is 30 degrees centigrade, which is a lot warmer Fahrenheit. You figure it out. Small area 30-degree anomalies. They backtracked to about 172. Then yesterday they pushed back to 175. The 29-degree isotherm, it's actually making a little bit of eastern headway. That suggests westerly anomalies pushing these winds a little bit to the east. The 28-degree isotherm holding tight at about 160. I think it was back at 162 or 163 a little while ago. It's making a little bit of a recovery. The 24-degree isotherm was back at 125. It's also made a little bit of eastern headway. We suspect all this is related to this active phase of the MJO that's been going on, westerly anomalies, blah, blah, blah. Not a Kelvin wave, but just pushing some warm water a little bit to the east. But over here in the far, look at this, a big jump up here in the thermocline, suggesting cooler waters in the East Pacific. In fact, let's take a look. Anomalies, differences from normal. Oh, there's the date, September 22nd. Differences in normal for this time of the year. Yeah, we see what looks to be a Kelvin wave, but when we did this video 2 weeks ago, this thing was still sitting in the exact same place. Hasn't really made any progress. It has built up to 3-degree anomalies now, down. This is under the date line, down 150 meters down. The issue is we don't think any of the westerly winds that have been occurring with this active phase of the MJO or any of the others in the past 5 months or so have been strong enough and had enough velocity to push Kelvin waves off to the east. In fact, look at this. We have a ball of 1, 2, 3 degree below normal temperatures here, pretty much filling the East Pacific. This is symptomatic of La Nina, and the issue is it really La Nina or is it just something in between? So we're watching the 150 degrees. So 150 west was right here, and this is where the cool water. I mean, there was a brick wall separating the cool water in the east and the warm water in the west. It's actually giving up a little bit here, and warm water is trying to make some headway to the east. That's maybe a good sign. Not really believing it, though. So there's been this game going on. We're going to see this in a minute where, the cool water pulses here and then backs off, and warm water starts to encroach. And then all of a sudden it wakes up and pulses again, and then pushes the warm water back. So this is not a trend yet. It is just a minor variation in the same theme. Okay, another version, different model, same thing. This one pretty much showing the brick wall between warm water in the west and cool water in the east. No warm water other than these 2 minor little pockets in the east. This smells more like La Nina. Sea level anomalies telling the same picture. So what is this? This is JSON2 satellite data. You can use it to see how high the seas are in storms. But if you strip out the seas, you strip out the wind waves, you strip out the tide, it just tells you how high the ocean surface is compared to normal for this time of the year. And what you see is we got a bump here, 5, 10 centimeters on the equator. That's all we really care about, and really only 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So in this area over the date line on the equator, we have, and the bump is caused by warm water depth expands, so it causes a little, literally a 5 centimeter bump on the ocean's surface. So another way of saying, hey, there's probably warm water under here. But if you look, here is like Colombia, Ecuador here, Galapagos there. -5 to -10 centimeter anomalies going out to, where's 150? Right about there. So just like what we saw subsurface, this is mapping the same thing. Cool water in the east, warm water in the west, brick wall between the two of them. Never the two shall meet. At least that's been the pattern as of late. Upper ocean heat anomalies, just a fancy way of saying over time. This chart is good for seeing over time what warm and cold water has been doing in the Pacific Basin. So this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. And you can see back is October 2018, Kelvin wave, warm water, pushing across the Pacific, all right? And then upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, a little bit of cool water. Another Kelvin wave, I don't remember, was this number 3 or number 4 back in February of this year. And then you see successive 1, 2, 3 small Kelvin waves. None of them make it to the East Pacific. If anything, cool water starts building in this area and building in the West Pacific. So you get the sense that this is the last of the warm water associated with the multi-year El Nino-like pattern that we've been in. It's just slowly dying and locked under the date line. And even if you had, what this really suggests is if you had a good, strong, active phase of the MJO here, westerly anomalies, there is not any warm water here to push to the west, to the east, to make a Kelvin wave. So it doesn't matter even if we try, if everything came into play, the ingredients for an El Nino just aren't present at all. If anything, this is typical of what happens when El Nino fades out. Things just get cooler, and then boom, you have La Nina, and it takes a couple of years for the ocean to recharge, and that's what all this smells like. Another way to look at it, upper ocean heat anomaly trend from, the Galapagos over to the date line. Back October 2018, lots of warm water in that area. You can see these pulses of Kelvin waves, boom, 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 and then smaller Kelvin wave, and what is this? Negative anomalies, suggesting cooler water setting up in the East Pacific. We know that to be true from everything we're seeing on all the other charts. All right, so let's go take a look at the surface and just see for ourselves what is going on the ocean surface. There's Ecuador, Peru, Chile. This is sea surface temperature anomalies, departures from normal for this time of year. The blues are negative anomalies. That means cold water. Colder than normal water here off of Chile, Peru, working their way across the equator the whole way to 140 west and then stop, and then you have weak warm water beyond there. So the interesting part here is the temperatures north of the equator a week ago were a lot warmer. They've given up some ground. The cool water is staying about the way it's been. It actually had made progress over to somewhere over in here a week or two ago. It is moving back, retrograding a little bit, but we think that is a temporary situation, mainly attributable to this past active phase of the MJO that we had. When it dissolves and the inactive phase of the MJO takes over, boom, easterly anomalies will start building. We'll get more upwelling here. It'll start migrating across the equator again, and it'll take on a more La Nina-like pattern. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. The good news is here, look at this. This is warming trend the whole way across the Pacific on the equator. A couple little pockets of cooling. This area was significantly colder. I think it was 2 weeks ago when we last did this. There was a definite cooling trend there. But now it's warming, again, attributable, we think, to the active phase of the MJO. We think this will start to reverse itself a week to 2 weeks out as the inactive phase gets a better foothold in the Pacific Ocean. And then, of course, let's just get out of the weeds. Let's step back, look at the big picture. It's pretty obvious. Cool water here on the equator in the Nino. This is the Nino 1.2 region, the Nino 3.4 region. The official El Nino monitoring region is out here in this box here, 120 west to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Cool water making progress into there, but it was the whole way over to 170 2 weeks ago, and so it's lost some ground, again attributable to the active phase of the MJO. The temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 region, again that area right there by the Galapagos in Peru, if it's below normal, that's a sign of La Nina. If it's above normal, that's El Nino. It's been below normal, half a degree or more for a while, since end of May. Little spike up, and then boom, really got cold back in September. Still hanging there, but this is kind of noisy. It's really the Nino 3.4 region that sort of smooths everything out, and that is the area that everyone tends to monitor. So you see back in June, July, we were at 0.4 of a degree above normal, and then something happened in August. Boom, the bottom dropped out. We went down to about a half degree below normal, and then a week ago we were down at almost 0.6 and about 0.59 degrees for a couple days. We've had a little rebound lately, but we expect this to fall back down once the inactive phase of the MJO gets control. Just a little side trip here. So this chart just maps the strength of the MJO. It doesn't say where it is, but you can see here's where we are right now. Very weak MJO pattern as of late, and even pretty much for the whole of the year. And it's been steadily, the last peak was February or so, February, March of 2018, and it's been on a steady decline since then. We were up at almost, I think this is up to 4 standard deviations above normal, and now we're down to like a half, something like that. Let's go back up. So there's an interesting little pattern I noticed here. So here's a year's worth in 2013, weak MJO, 2014 weak, and then in 2015 El Nino and big massive spikes, and then in 2015, 2016, again 2016 El Nino started fading, and then in 2017 a spike, but then weak. 2018 tried to spike, so we're on a downward trend. I suspect we're going to be in a downward trend at least 2019, if not 2020, and then maybe we'll be in a better place after that. And finally, the forecast for sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model. So here's where we are in the end of August, the end of September, or this is the beginning of September actually. This is the forecast, and this model has temperatures rising steadily the whole way through September to almost El Nino strength. This is not happening. This model isn't even close. The model said, oh yeah, for sure, we're going to be, in warmer than normal temperatures the whole way through this coming winter and not go neutral until June of next year. And a bunch of the other models are saying, not as dramatic as this, but basically a neutral to warm above normal water temperature pattern in the Pacific for this winter. We're not seeing it at all. We looked at the data. Hang on. Here's the actuals for the Nino 3.4 region, and this is just one little spike that has it nearly neutral, but it's been steadily negative, and I just don't see this getting up to here given this or given this. Though, that said, we looked at, you can do this on your own, click this link, go look. We have seen there are some years where you get this sort of a cool pattern, and then by the time you get to December, January, it turns to neutral. Not El Nino, but just neutral. But they're given one other thing. This chart with the steadily fading Kelvin wave scenario, steadily building cool water temperature east and west. Again, there's no way that I can logically see that some sort of a neutral water temperature pattern is going to evolve for this winter. If anything, the guess is at this time, unless a miracle occurs, we're going to be maybe not in La Nina, but a cooler than normal water temperature regime. So what's that mean? That means that, yeah, there's some hangover from El Nino-like thing that's going on. I mean, there's actually been some rain in the San Francisco Bay Area already this time of year. Two rain systems. Normally, you never see that till mid-October, mid to late October, and we've had 2 in September already. The thought being we're in some sort of a hangover situation, and the warm water that is over the equator, like here, this warm water here all around. So this is hangover from El Nino with a building La Nina starting to cut through the heart of it. So the jet stream and the upper level pattern and all that hasn't detected or hasn't fully assimilated, coupled with the changes that are occurring in the ocean. So the atmosphere still thinks, yeah, we're normal, or maybe we're weak El Nino. We think that's going to hold on. We said this a month or 2 ago. We think this El Nino to neutral kind of pattern thing's going to hold on till the December-ish time frame. But then at some point, the bottom's just going to fall out. Precipitation will shut down in California. The storm machine will shut down, and a more clear La Nina pattern will develop. I mean, I still have hope that the CFS model is right. Somehow, magically, warm water builds all over here, and the jet stream kind of wakes up, and it's just like we come out with a normal year, or even a little bit better than normal. But the ocean doesn't appear to be supporting what the model is saying. So the jury's still out. I have my sense is I'd rather be conservative and think that I'm going to get La Nina, and it's not going to be a great year. And then if we get something better than that, great. It's all gravy. But to tell you all that, yeah, it looks like it's going to be a good year because the models all say, a good winter because the models are saying, warm water and all that. I don't want to do that. I don't think it's fair to people, and I don't think it's right. So that's my forecast. I'm going to go on the negative side, say I think we're going to some weak version of La Nina for this winter, but we'll be okay till about the December time frame. So the strategy should be is get whatever surf you can get whatever snow you can get as early in the season as possible, because later in the season I think it's going to be a bit of a bust. Other than that, there is southern hemi swell pushing its way towards California and Hawaii, and it could be kind of fun for the next week. So for sure, make use of that. There's going to be a bunch of wind swell, and there's going to be some swell coming out of the Gulf of Alaska mixing with that at the same time. So you got to find some south exposed break that's totally blocked from any north swell to try, unless you've got a good break that can handle both north swell and south swell at the same time. Even into Southern California, I think some of that wind swell is going to make it down there. So we'll do that thing. And then after that, North Pacific doesn't look like a whole lot's going on. South Pacific looks like it's shutting down. Inactive phase of the MJO is setting up. So later October just doesn't look particularly inspirational. But after that, we get into mid-November sort of thing into December. I think things could get pretty interesting there. That's going to be a sweet spot that's going to be well worth capturing. All right, so that's pretty much it for this week. As usual, if you haven't subscribed, down on the on your right-hand side, lower right, you have the opportunity to subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll get, if you ring the bell, there's a little bell next to that. Click that. You'll get automatic notifications every time we do an update. Though everybody that's been here a while tends to know Sunday evening's the update time. That's when we push out the updates. But go ahead and subscribe anyway. If you like the video, click like. Always, you can visit our website. There it is, stormsurf.com. Take a look, all the models, everything's lurking here in the site. You just use the nav bar up here at the top for the wave models, the weather models, individual forecasts for surf spots. You can look at JSON2 altimetry, snow forecasts when we get there, our detailed Pacific forecasts, or the short quick cast for select locations. You get the idea. We have some tutorials, great circles, all kinds of stuff, buoys. So you go check it out if you have a little bit of time to spare. This is where we get all our data from. Otherwise, we'll be doing this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching, and we appreciate you viewing the videos.